Hello, Omaha, and welcome back to Keep Moving Forward, a table talk for the City of Omaha Human Rights and Relations Department. I'm Laura Aite.
And I'm Lori O'Brien, and our department has been tasked in part with enforcing federal and local anti-discrimination laws with people who have allegations of discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations. So if you believe you experienced any type of discrimination or simply want more information, you can call our office at 402-444-5055 or go online to our website at humanrights.cityofomaha.org.
We also conduct outreach and education on all areas of human rights. So today we are pleased to welcome our guest, Dustin Pendley.
Welcome.
He's here to talk to us about the issue of mass incarceration and UNO's track program. A little bit about Dustin. Dustin Pendley is the coordinator of administration for the English department and lead academic advisor for the medical humanities program at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. He's a mentor and advocate for formerly and currently incarcerated students, and he teaches 4 credit English classes at the Omaha Correctional Center. He's excited to teach the first Inside Out class offered by UNO at the Omaha Correctional Center next fall. Inside Out classes bring together campus-based students and incarcerated students for a semester-long class. So welcome, Dustin. Thanks so much for being our guest today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. That's great. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And so, Dustin, we kind of wanted to start talking about like the background of mass incarcerations and some of the problems with that.
Absolutely. I think we can safely say that mass incarceration is a reality in the United States. We have the most incarcerated people in the world. On any given day, there are approximately 2 million people incarcerated. The numbers really started to increase in the 1980s. You know, lots of reasons for that: tough on crime, war on drugs, and really got to a height of 2.2 million people incarcerated on any given day in jails, prisons, state and federal. Also on about any day, there are about 6.9 million people who are either incarcerated, on probation, on parole, have in some capacity they are under control by probation or incarcerated. As well, there are about 600,000 people who are released every year from state and federal prisons, and and about 9 million people are going in and out of jails each year. So and also we think about it, there are 77 million Americans who have either been arrested or convicted of a crime, and so these types of convictions or arrests even can affect employment, can affect the ability to get a job. It's just a really a lot of potential for collateral consequences. So just one more number. I looked this up one time. So in Omaha, we have the Douglas County Jail, which people go in there before they go to prison, or maybe they're waiting for sentencing. It's just everyone's seen it. It's downtown. In 1980, the Douglas County Jail could hold 200 people. And the population of Omaha was 397,000. In 2017, the population is up to about 560,000, but on an average day, there were 1,271 people in the Douglas County Jail, right? So it's not really, there has been population growth, but the growth of incarcerating people has far exceeded the population growth. And so that's sort of what we are faced with currently, and a lot of people are really thinking about it, right? A lot of them, in positions of government, education, everywhere. It's a reality on the left and the right. It's an issue. Kind of how do we address as a nation, as a city, as a state, mass incarceration as the reality of it.
Yeah, right. And that's a huge number. All those numbers are huge. And you bring up a really good point that the rate of people in jail is growing at a far faster rate than the actual population. I think that just shows us that this is a problem, in our country. And Dustin, you also mentioned collateral consequences. Could you kind of tell us a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, I think that's important, and I don't know if a lot of people are necessarily thinking about collateral consequences and what those are. I think, likely a person, we see someone committed a crime, and then we know that they are going to go to prison and serve a sentence for that, and a lot of people feel good about that, right? Like you did the crime, now do the time. But the reality is that there are also collateral consequences that follow that person, right? I think as Americans, a lot of times we want to think of, if you work hard at something that you'll be rewarded, or if you do your time, if you do your consequence, then yeah, we will embrace you and we'll welcome you back to what society has to offer. But I was talking to so again, I work with students who are formerly incarcerated, currently incarcerated, and I talked to a few of the formerly incarcerated students that I work with, and I'm like, hey, what are some collateral consequences that you've had that you experienced that really hit home? And one of the students mentioned how once he was released from prison, it took him over a month to just find a place to rent. He had to find a private landlord. None of the larger agencies were willing to rent to them. I was talking to another student, and he mentioned that he had applied for a mail carrier position, really nailed the interview, were really impressed with him, and they said, yeah, we'll hire you contingent on a background check. Background check came back, and they said, you're not suitable for this position. He appealed it, and he submitted with his appeal his education records, his treatment records, his honorable discharge from the Army, and he also had, as a character reference, the phone number of a sitting state Nebraska senator to kind of vouch for who he is today, right? The changes that he made and the progress that he's making in his life. 2 weeks later, no, we're not going to hire you. And then one last student I was talking to, she gave kind of 3 examples. One was she had a national certificate on training for personal training and sports nutrition, and not one gym in Nebraska would hire her. Then she was looking at medical school and was speaking to a recruiter. I was like, oh yeah, you're the best student that I've met with today. And then she disclosed, hey, I've been to prison. And he said, well, our school will never admit you. And if you were to get into a medical school, we would not hire you to be a doctor. And then finally, once she had completed her undergraduate degree, she applied at a number of behavioral health centers around Omaha. And the interviewers all loved her and wanted to hire her right away, but every time HR rescinded the offer. So it's a reality. I mean, she's thriving now, but those doors, they're not currently open. She has a lot of really good ideas, a lot of lived experience, a lot of knowledge that could have really helped in medicine or working with youth who are having behavior. Who better to help a youth than someone who's sort of lived that experience? So yeah, the collateral consequences. Those are issues that I think as a society we all could play a hand in kind of alleviating those kinds of pressures.
Yeah,
Right.
That's unfortunate that somebody's, maybe a bad choice that someone makes affects their lifelong dreams. I mean, that doesn't seem very fair.
Yeah, for the rest of their life, it sounds like, in all areas, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we see the collateral consequences. We see those in all areas of
Yeah,
life.
housing.
Yeah.
We were recently, if you were watching the unicameral, there was a bill to restore benefits for food and SNAP benefits, and that was for people, because there's a law where if you've been convicted of drug charges, then you're not eligible for those kinds of benefits, and that didn't pass. But hopefully some of the it affects them in a number of ways. So.
Yeah.
And so, what are some of the solutions that you can
Right.
talk about with mass incarcerations?
Well, there are a lot of potential solutions out there, and I would say that there's work being done, because like I mentioned, at the height it was 2.2 million people. Now we're down to about 1.82 million people incarcerated on any given day. So that's a decrease from the peak. So I'm here to talk about sort of how education can be a solution, right? And how higher education in prison, and the more education that a person attains, then the less likelihood that they are going to recidivate, and they're also going to be empowered, right? Because I kind of look at it, you kind of look at maybe a cup, right? And after I've been incarcerated, my privilege is really, my ability to have social capital is devastated, right? I mean, there's so much working against me, and so it's really low. The level of social capital is really low, but the more education that I get, it starts to even out, and I start to regain some of that ability to speak out and gain footing in society. So RAND Corporation has had a number of studies on how education is how it helps to with employment and with recidivism. And so one of their studies found that 13%, if a person takes college classes while they're incarcerated, they have a 13% greater chance of finding a job post-prison. And it also found, and this number I think is really just a large number, if someone participates in college while they're incarcerated, they have a 43% chance of not recidivating.
Wow.
Right? That's a big number. And then this number is kind of hard to wrap your mind around, but it has to do with for every dollar that's spent on while someone's incarcerated on education, then $4 to $5 are saved in re-incarceration costs 3 years later for that person, right? And so what that means is if we're willing to spend $1 to help someone go to school and have that mentorship and have that ability to have an academic presence and all that comes with thinking about being a student and all that comes with that, then society is spending $4 or $5 less dollars each time, because a staggering number is about 2/3 of people who are released from prison will be re-arrested, and half of them will be re-incarcerated within 3 years. So the more education, at least from the data that RAND has produced, there's a less likelihood of that.
And we need to break that cycle.
Right.
Right, I agree. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great information. And so could you tell us just a little bit more about the track program at UNO?
Right, yeah, absolutely. I love talking about track. I think it's so important. So track stands for transforming, renewing, achieving, and connecting, because these are actions that we believe can happen for the person who is incarcerated, who starts to take classes and then really starts to have an academic, because person can take on multiple identities, right? And as a person starts to take college classes, they can start to perceive themselves as a college student because that's what they're actively doing. And so it starts to be transformative, and it renews them, and there's achievement that happens, and you connect with other scholars and professors who are coming in and teaching classes. So the track program started in the fall of 2017. Our donor for the program, he met with the Dean of Arts and Sciences and said he was formerly incarcerated, and that education, he's a UNO graduate and he really believes in education, and he wanted to pilot a higher education in prison program. And he really wanted an English class and a math class, because he thought, yeah, let's give the incarcerated people an opportunity to take some classes. Maybe they'll get really into it and then get into higher education and succeed. Well, that fall semester, Dr. Dan Webben taught an English 1200 autobiographical reading and writing. This is a great class. It's used by the Thompson Learning Community at UNO. It's a community building class. It gets students reading memoir, it gets them writing memoir. It's a really powerful it's critical and it's creative. It has everything you need. It builds community. And so what's really, really interesting about that particular class is 2 of the students in that first class are now in graduate programs at UNO, right? So that was really great. And then the next semester, Dan and Dr. Webb and then Dr. Nikita Amani also taught a class. He taught an introduction to sociology. And so there were 2 classes, right?
Yeah.
And this is going great. And then the summer we had a class, an introduction to political science, and we kept having Dan and Dr. Amani continue to teach classes. And so between fall of 2017 and this last spring, we've offered 20 classes from, we've had English classes, and there's a World Civ class that's been offered a couple of times, and it's really interesting because Dr. Saltamakia in her class, she'll have the students reenact some of the moments in history, I believe it's the Crusades, and so I just kind of imagine like what's going on, how that in disrupting the carceral kind of space with this reenactment of the Crusades, and the students love that, and the students, they've written a number of testimonials and their great experience. Same with faculty. Faculty have had a tremendous experience teaching classes. This last spring, Dr. Amani taught Introduction to Black Studies. And then this summer, kind of getting back to our roots, I'm going to teach an English Composition 1 class, and then Dr. Sand is going to teach a math class, a quantitative literacy. So I've taught 1 class in there before, and I can tell you a little bit about my experience teaching. So I taught in the summer of 2019, I taught a literature class, English 1010, and I had about 8 students in the class, and it was a great experience. Students, they tend to do the work they're supposed to do, but and the students I had in this class, they always read everything, and they were ready to discuss, and they had ideas, and they had lived experience, and it was great. And something that a lot of us who teach to incarcerated students, one thing that we don't do is we don't Google them, right? We don't look up their past, because they can't go and Google me and look at rate my professor or anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
They don't have that ability. It's just unnecessary, right? You meet them where they're at, and another kind of experience I remember was we were really engaged, and sort of a loose sense of where you're at. You get caught up with whatever the topic is, the literature that we're reading, and I start hearing this chain rattling behind me, and we're in the classroom, and I'm like, what is that? And they're like, oh, that's just the hole, right? So it was kind of jarring, because it really kind of, I'm in a prison again, right? And so it was like the highlight of my teaching. So I'm definitely looking forward to teaching Comp 1 this summer. Sounds like I'm going to have a full class of 18 students, and I think I have a good idea why that is, and I'll circle back to my hypothesis on why both classes are going to be full this summer, because so there's more to track than just the higher education classes. We decided to start a formerly incarcerated student organization on campus. Really bad timing. It was January 2020. Oh, no. So we decided to start, and there were about 4 students. A couple of the students were students that I was kind of telling you about the collateral consequences they ran into. But we met, we had ideas, and we came up with a constitution, and we were going to do a lot of outreach, and really, because we were going to connect with Metropolitan Community College's 180 RAP program, which is another higher education and prison program, amazing, nationally known program, doing great work, and just really wanted to partner with them. We ended up doing a lot of Zoom meetings because everything was, everyone remembers what happened March 13th, 2020. So we did a lot of Zoom meetings. We met with a student from California who had started a formerly incarcerated student organization, and he gave us a lot of ideas. There was a lot in California. They're really a model. They have a number of the universities have organizations. They're teaching in the prison, so there's a really good model. We did some Zoom calls, some events to try to really get the word out of the importance, and we really want advisors to listen, because one of the students I mentioned, she wanted to be a doctor, and when she was advised, the advisors would be, yeah, that's great, and really empower her, which is a good thing, but you also have to have a realistic backup, right?
yeah.
Because it's just not, at this point, I don't believe anybody who's formerly incarcerated has been able to push through that particular barrier.
Really?
With medical school. Law is difficult too. I mean, there are a lot of different, and then licenses and everything. And so it just depends on each state too.
Oh, I see.
So we had that meeting, and we had those, and then we got the idea, we really like to expand to this student group to inside, to meeting with the students. So Alana, that's the student I've been talking about, and I, and Maeve Hemmer, who's the former student body president at UNO. She was last year's student body president. We decided to go in and create a student group in the prison, right? To talk about what they're going through, to give them an opportunity to kind of vent if they're having struggles being college students inside, and to also start to think about and really empower them and show them, hey, you can continue on and earn a degree, right? It
Yeah.
happens. It's important. If that's what you want to do,
Right.
we want to be supportive of you and help you do that. And so that group averages anywhere from 20 to 30 of the incarcerated students at Omaha Correctional Center. And I also started doing advising with students, like on one-on-one. And I think, so one of the classes, the quantitative literacy and the composition 1, those are fundamental academic skills. So I think the reason why the classes are so desired right now is because a lot of these students are really thinking like, hey, I can go on and I can get a college degree at UNO, or hopefully UNO, Mavericks, right?
Yeah.
But wherever, right? I mean, ultimately the whole idea is to have more formerly incarcerated students, have that opportunity.
I love your passion about it too, Dustin. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are doing awesome things. Now, the Inside Out class sounded really cool to me. And now, is this the first time it's going to be offered?
It will be the first time that UNO has offered it, and then the first Inside Out class that I'm aware of at the Omaha Correctional Center. There is a history of Inside Out classes in Nebraska. I remember I did a little Googling, I think, and came up with Peru State had there was a professor, a criminal justice professor, who taught 3 classes at Tecumseh in, I don't know if it was the 90s or the early 2000s or some point, right? And it was probably the aughts, in the 2000s. So basically there were, in that model, the Peru State students went into the correctional facility, but I don't believe that the incarcerated students were getting college credit. But it was still the Inside Out model. And what's interesting is one of the students that I was working with in our student group, he's transitioned to the Work Release facility across the street from the Omaha Correctional Center, was actually in one of those Inside Out classes. So that was just a neat thing to hear about, and he said it was a wonderful experience. So Inside Out originated in Philadelphia through Temple University, and has expanded, and now there are Inside Out classes that are happening all over the world. So you typically, if you're going to teach an Inside Out class, you'll do the training. And so I took the training in this last summer, and it's an extensive training, and it was about an 8-day, 9-hour day training. We were able to meet on Zoom. So it used to be the model where you would fly into Philadelphia and do the Inside Out training there. But with COVID, that all kind of changed, so we have a new model. And so instead of going into prisons and meeting with currently incarcerated students, what they had was formerly incarcerated students would join us in the training, and we would be able to because in the training you're basically doing a lot of the work that you'll do as a facilitator of the class, down the road. And so that training was a lot of emotional work, a lot of critical and intellectual work, a lot of community building. Heard a lot of really good stories from the formerly incarcerated participants. And just a note on the language I choose. So I say formerly incarcerated, I'll say currently incarcerated. I would say maybe a person who uses drugs or something like that. I make a conscious decision to use person first language rather than identity first language, which identity for would be saying things like inmate or prisoner or drug addict or prostitute. These are just terms that are not person first, right? And they are and people who are formerly incarcerated or currently incarcerated have asked for us to change our language, right? Because how would you want to be identified as the bad decision that you make? And it kind of follows you around.
Of course, right.
But the Inside Out class I'm going to teach in the fall, so it's going to be 8 campus students and then 8 incarcerated students, and they'll all get college credit. It's a dual-listed course between English and criminology and criminal justice. What we're going to be looking at, we're going to be looking at creative writing and memoir written by incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people, and then and so there's going to be a lot of class discussions and a lot of wrestling with the issues that are involved with prisons, right? So probably looking at a life without parole, probably looking at solitary confinement, looking at children when women have children, just looking at the issues and reading what's been written, and then the students will also be writing, and then the whole class will culminate at the end with a 4-week project, and I'm still coming up with the idea for what I want them to do for the final project, looking at some different options. But the outside students, I met with them and interviewed them, and there was actually more students who were wanting to take the class than there were seats, right? So there's they want more of these opportunities, but a lot of criminal justice, criminology, criminal justice majors and social work majors really are wanting to take the class. And then I have a political science major and a journalism major. So it should be a really, it's transformational, as everyone has said, for everyone involved. The more students that can have experiences like this, so if you have a young person, right, a child, that you encourage them to think of ways that they can volunteer and be a part of these positive kinds of movements.
Right.
Good point.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that class is going to be a great experience for everyone involved, and we are actually just about out of time. So I just wanted to thank you again for joining us today and sharing all of your knowledge with us. I know that there's probably so much more that you could teach us about this topic and this issue.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. Be sure to tune again next month. And lastly, if you believe you've been a victim of discrimination, please contact our office at 402-444-5055 or visit our website at humanrights.cityofomaha.org. I'm Laura Aite.
And I'm Lori O'Brien, and this is Keep Moving Forward.